maybe our parents were like, let's watch VeggieTales and Bible Man. Man, I just couldn't get enough of X-Men and Dragon Ball. Is there room for my faith and my love of movies? And what does it look like to then merge that? And then what does it look like to try to do it actually well? A lot of secular media in the West has become so concerned with preaching that it feels a lot like Christian media from the 2000s. We don't want to be preached at when we consume our art and entertainment, right? It was kind of in this historical reinterpretation of Genesis. Well, what if it was more like the Chronicles of Narnia? What if it was more of a fantasy parable, and the fantasy world is inspired by the world of Genesis? And that's kind of where we ended up finally landing on what ended up becoming Gabriel and the Guardians. Dude, like, we brought an actual episode to fruition, which nobody thought we could do. 3-4 guys not from Hollywood making a pilot, and then people are like, whoa, like, they did it, and it's like good. Whether or not you believe it literally or not doesn't really matter, because it's telling us something about our ancestors and what they thought, and that's interesting.
Hello and welcome to CultureScape, the show that interviews the geek creators and influencers who built nerd culture. I'm your host, Pete Pischke, and today we're going to jump into the new anime-inspired show, Gabriel and the Guardians, made by Angel Studios. Gabriel and the Guardians is an anime-inspired fantasy series focused on retelling of the book of Genesis from the Old Testament. It features a prodigious voice cast with talents like Johnny Yong Bosch. He's a personal favorite of mine, cannot get enough of Mr. Bosch. Also, James Arnold Taylor, Matt Lanter, Christina V, all big names in the Western voice acting industry. And to talk about Gabriel with me today, I have its creator, Jason Moody.
Howdy, howdy.
Excited to have you.
Thank you, man. Yeah, excited to be here.
Yeah, as my audience members know, on CultureScape, I'm a big fan of getting new media from every side of the cultural spectrum. So I think it's great we're seeing something inspired by anime, that's coming from part of the culture that usually doesn't think so highly of my favorite Japanese medium. So I do like that. I do like that change. I think that's very positive. So I'm very excited to have you on the show today.
Yeah, isn't that's something, right? It's the church isn't always a fan, but I am, so.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I can remember growing up, especially back even in the 2000s, and people at church like, why are you watching that satanic cartoon? It's so horrible. How could you do that?
My mom, I remember just watching Dragon Ball. My mom just was like, what is this? And why does it seem so evil? You know what I mean? And like, evil, it's cool. It's key. It's not sorcery. Chill out.
Yeah, no, it's just different.
Yeah.
No, I just think it's fantastic. And, Angel Studios, they've been trying to make a real push. They come, obviously, from more conservative, more Christian part of the culture, which is fine. And they're trying to push a lot more of, people who are conservative. I hear all the time, I've said even on the show when I've interviewed other people, we wish that, conservatives, they want to talk about the culture war so much. That's such an important issue to them that why don't they actually go out there and produce culture? And so when we have a company, when you have creators like yourself who are like, okay, let's do that, I think that's great.
It's a great question. For a group of the culture that has so much to say about the media and culture's media, they sure don't produce a whole lot. And when they do, I think, and I can say this as a part of that culture, it's not always great. It's not always great. So, definitely part of the, I think what is happening is you have a generation of people who grew up from a certain particular worldview set that also loved movies and loved cartoons and loved media, and whether, like, despite how much I think our maybe our parents were like, let's watch VeggieTales and Bible Man. It's like, man, I just couldn't get enough of X-Men and Dragon Ball, and so we make space for that, right? As we get older and we begin to want to live from a place of synchronized, we want to get rid of our duality, and we want to be like, what is there room for my faith and my love of movies and media, and what does it look like to then merge that, and then what does it look like to try to do it actually well, right? To make it in a way that feels excellent, as good as anything else that I watched when I was a kid, or maybe better.
That's a good point. That is a major criticism of more Christian, especially something that's like, this is Bible media. I think it's kind of as an association, except for maybe Veggie Tales.
Right.
It's just not very high quality. It's very schlocky. It's very cheesy. It's very low production. You could just imagine that the poor animators, they hire from Mexico, just chained to their desks trying to draw out the just if I could just get out that next frame.
From, like, it's weird, man, because I kind of have one foot in both camps, right? Like I have a great appreciation for what church is and what it means to people, and being raised in the church. I get it. I very much get it, and I have no real animosity toward the church, and I consider myself a part of the church. But man, not everything has to be preached. I think that's the biggest thing, is that when you try to make everything an agenda, I think we are actually seeing it. I mean, part of the, not to dive right into it, but part of the problem with what we've seen from the other side, from the more liberal perspective of media, is that the last decade or so has been so agenda heavy and driven that it's become a cost in their storytelling, in my opinion. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, no, I think in many cases that is true. Yeah, especially in the West.
A lot of secular media in the West has become so concerned with preaching something that it feels a lot like Christian media from the 2000s, from the early 2000s. It's like, ooh, man, when there's something we don't want to be preached at when we consume our art and entertainment. We just don't want to be preached at. I think we can tell morals, we can tell really beautiful tales, and we can marinate our art from worldview, from a certain worldview. But the moment you turn that art into a pedestal to preach from, something's lost. Something gets funky, and it feels bad. It feels worse. It feels like, oh, this art is jaded, and it doesn't seem as good. That's my opinion. But
I mostly agree with that. Reviews so far for the pilot, because the pilot episode is out there for people to watch if they want to check it out. It's pretty good. I think on IMDb, I think it has an 8.6 out of 10. It's pretty strong, all things considered. So the voice acting talent you brought in, these are very well respected, very big voice talents. Yong Bosch, who this is a little bit of the conceit of doing this interview. I'm hoping to get on the show. No offense aimed at you, Jason, though.
No, none taken. Johnny is cool. Very cool.
James Arnold Taylor, Matt Lanter, they're from Clone Wars and a million other things. You have Christina V. She did Ladybug. My niece loves that show. I'm sure she's going to send me Ladybug merch any day now.
Yeah. No. That's part of it, man. That's part of like my, coming from a certain culture where it's like, it seems like there was just kind of a pass on like, well, it's fine as long as it's telling a good message. It's okay if it's not as good. And I went, no, like when part of the ethos of when I felt like I wanted to make this thing was, okay, if I'm going to make it, it has to be good. You at least have to try to make it so that it can sit on the same shelf as any other animated series, and that it stands up. At least it doesn't have to be even better or even necessarily like, not saying we're as good, but at least we compete. I wanted to compete. I wanted to have the same kind of talent and have, tell a good story and have art that is on the same level, at least, so that we sit on the shelf and we don't look just totally out of place. That was definitely part of the goal, to make art that stands up to anybody else's art,
Excellent. No, I completely agree with that ethos. I was one of those crazy people that even now at church, they're like, we're going to watch this video. It's produced. I'm LDS, so it's usually produced from like some college students at BYU,
Yeah.
and it's just not very good. And there's like, and there's like this pressure. No, you have to say it's great. I'm like, it just.
Because it's from our tribe, and it's like, well, yeah, but I want our tribe to be better. We should be making the best art. We're like, we represent, if we truly believe what we believe, right? If you're a believer, Christian, right? I don't know what your audience, but if you're Christian, and like you believe that you're in the image of the greatest creator ever, the creator, like we should be creating great stuff. If we're in his image, we should be also creating to the highest of our ability. And so I think for me, every time something comes out of Christian media that doesn't just feels like it was just done fast and done not excellently, it's like, man, what a shame, what a slight. This is representing the creator. You know what I mean? So, yeah, that's
no, that's an excellent point. I agree with that. It's like, well, if you're saying this is supposed to represent, the person that you worship, the being that you worship, then it has to be next level.
Should be great.
Gotta go the extra work
with all the gems and with as much gold as possible, right? It should be done up. No, this is my offering to my utmost for his highest. You know what I mean? Like, so I think if we could take the things that we make and think about it in that way, and this is not only am I trying to make something that's great for people to participate in and enjoy and be entertained by, I'm also creating something that I believe is an act of worship. So, yeah.
Let's get into your background. You have a little bit of an untraditional background, which is fine in the indie space. Indie space is nice where you can get people from all over the place. You spent a decade and a half with J.P. Morgan Chase as a senior media specialist. I see on your LinkedIn, even before that, you do have some storyboard experience, but it's definitely not traditional for someone that's going to be producing something that's anime-inspired action cartoon. How did that come about? How did you find the people at Angel Studios, or did they find you?
Yeah, so it's an interesting story, man. I really wanted to get into cartoons, man. I just was, as a kid, first time I watched a cartoon, I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to make that one. The moment I realized that was made by somebody, I was like, I want to make stuff like that. And I mean, so pretty quickly I had a sketchbook in front of me, Saturday mornings, drawing everything that I saw, redrawing Darkwing Duck and Doug and Rugrats and Batman and the X-Men and just anything that was on in the morning on Saturday mornings, I was sitting there trying to draw. And then, inevitably that translated into coming up with my own characters and creating stuff. But I'm from the Midwest, man. I'm from Ohio. I'm the land of corn, and so there's not a whole lot of opportunity, to kind of step into the industry. And so I really thought I would figure out a way in. And then I got into my mid-20s and I was just like, this is impossible. I was like working at Walmart, but trying to, on my side, on the side, trying to do this, do that. I did have an opportunity to do a mini series for a small comic book publisher called Ape Entertainment back in the mid 2000s. We had a mini series that went out and it did pretty well. Like we got certified cool on previews, diamond previews. And, there's an old website called Ain't It Cool News that did a big feature on us on the book. And so, man, I was like, that's it. Like I'm in, I'll be a comic book, creator. And then the book went out and it did its sales, and I went back to the publisher and I was like, hey, we did it. They were like, yeah, really good. Like really great indie book. You guys did a great job. And I was like, sweet. When's my check? You know what I mean? They're like, oh, there's no check. They were like, you didn't make any money. I was like, what do you mean? I went around and did all these conventions and signed books and all this stuff. I was with you guys. We made money. And they're like, no, we made money. you didn't make any money.
That
You know?
sounds like some news jobs I've taken on. I know exactly where you're coming from on that.
Yeah, and so I was like, they were like, if you want to make money at comics, you got to just go draw for Marvel or something. There, you can't make your own books and be creative. You can't make your own thing and be successful. They're like, that's just like you're not, you're not Mark Wade, And I was like, okay, fine, I guess I'll figure out something here, in Ohio. And so I didn't want to move out to the coast or to New York. I was like, you know what? Okay, this isn't for me. I can't make money at doing comics, and I don't see a way into making cartoons. So I'll make web cartoons. And so that's what I started doing. I just started making web cartoons, and I ended up getting a job here in Ohio, and that led me to working at JP Morgan Chase, working in their media development department for a long time. They made cartoons and stuff for training, right? And when I could, most of the time I had to just do boring stuff, but every once in a while I got to make like a little cartoon or something. And so COVID hit, that changed everything. Honestly, that's what happened. I was in the middle of working at Chase. I was actually pretty fine with it. I was making decent money and, had a family and had a house and all that. And then COVID hit and, don't tell Chase, but I didn't have a whole lot of work to do for a while, for like a year. It was like, okay, I got like a few hours of work every week. Like what's happening right now. And they were just like, yeah, it'll pick up. Don't worry. We're not going to let anybody go because it'll pick up. And it just didn't for a long time, man. And, so, in that vacancy in that void, I had a lot of creative energy. I just, I created someone, if you're creative, I think, like it's just hard to stop being creative. It doesn't go away just because you don't have something to do. You just find something new to do. So I spent about a week making puppets with my kids. And so that was the first thing we did during COVID was like, we went, like really got into puppets, like a little creepy, too much puppet for about a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks. We did puppets. And once that ran its course and we made as many puppets as we could, and we made pretty good puppets. I mean, they were like as good as you can with the fabric that you can get at like a Michael's, right? That ran its course. And then I went and got a sketchbook. I was like, you know what? I'm going to sketch. I haven't really sketched in a long time. It's been years since I sketched. So I got a sketchbook and I was listening to a podcast called The Bible Project because they had this really killer series on Genesis. And so I was listening to their Genesis series and I was like, this is just fascinating. And my wife and I both were just like, wow, have you ever, has Genesis ever been opened up to you like this before? I was like, no, this is really cool. And so like, it's almost a gateway drug. Genesis is like you dive deep enough into Genesis and you're just like, well, I got to learn about the book of Enoch. Like, like the Genesis part 2, what's that about? And then, just you start, I became fascinated, man, with the cultures, the Canaanites and the Sumerians and the Akkadians, and all these cultures that are represented there in that first book. And then just the idea that this is one of the oldest texts in the world. Like, I mean, Genesis becomes a little, blasé, I think, to some extent, because it's like baked into the Bible, and it's like, but it's in terms of historical documents. We're talking about, these are some of the oldest stories in the world. Like, I mean, these are like the Dead Sea Scrolls, like had pieces of Genesis in it. And it's like this, we're talking, these are ancient oral traditions that then were written down. And then those writings are some of the oldest writings we have, but you can dial that back and you've got written, the oldest writings in the world are basically, these writings that are, who knows how old the oral traditions were, right? So our oldest writings are tales that are even older. Like, who knows how far back those traditions were told and retold until finally they were written down and collected into the Torah, right? And so I was just fascinated by this. I'm like, man, I'm peeking in. I don't know how I didn't think about this as a kid, but I'm peeking into our origins, you know what I mean? The mankind and where did it come from? And Whether or not you believe it literally or not doesn't really matter, because it's telling us something about our ancestors and what they thought and what they believed. And that's interesting. And so all of that was kind of swirling around in my brain. And then I got to Genesis 6. And it says in Genesis 6, it says, in the days of Noah, there were giants that walked the earth. And I was like, oh, hold on. There were giants in the Noah story. I missed that part in Sunday school. I didn't see the felt giant on the, if you ever went to Sunday school, they used to have these felt boards and they put these felt Bible characters up. And I was like, I never saw the giant there. And so I was just fascinated by that idea. And so Genesis 6, 7, and 8, where it talks about the Watchers and it talks about, the Nephilim. I was just like, this is crazy. And so I just began to come up with this concept that was like, could you take that story and tell it in a way that like would capture the imagination of kids? You know what I mean? Like my daughter, she was like 14 at the time. And so I'm like drawing these characters. I'm just trying to get her. I'm just like, you think that's cool? You think that, I drew Noah. And I'm like, you think that's cool? And then telling her the stories. And it got to a point, she was like, this is a story about the Bible I'd actually watch if it was a show. If it was an anime, I'd watch it. And I was like, okay, we're on to something. We're cooking with gas. And that's really where the idea kind of sparked. We inevitably moved it from like historical, right? It was kind of in this historical reinterpretation of Genesis space. And we ended up kind of moving it into like, well, what if it was more like the Chronicles of Narnia? What if it was more of a parable, a fantasy parable, and the fantasy world is inspired by the world of Genesis? Like, it's like a fantasy world, but it's like, it's Nephilim and behemoths and Leviathan and all the things you find. And all the cultures are inspired by the cultures that you find in Genesis. So you've got the Sumerians and you've got the Paleo Hebrews, the tribe of Abraham and Noah and Seth and the Sethites. And it's like, what if you take all that and you begin to homogenize it and distill it into sort of a fantasy tale? And that's kind of where we ended up finally landing on what ended up becoming Gabriel and the Guardians. But it's a...
Okay, but then how did you hook up with Angel Studios? Because it's one thing to have a cool idea. It's another thing to get it into a working project.
You're absolutely right. That you did ask that question, and I bypassed it. That's because I don't know. No, I do. What happened was, man, honestly, like when I honestly just felt like something in my gut, spirit, whatever your audience wants to call it, felt something in here that said, this is supposed to be made. This is meant to be made. Mm-hmm. This is something that hasn't been told quite this way before. And so I felt like I had an opportunity to tell the tales of something that I felt very passionate about, which is the Old Testament and the Bible, but tell it in a way that wasn't cheesy and wasn't preaching, and make it kind of fun and make it kind of cool the way I felt like I was seeing it. And so I was like, man, I think I can do this. And so you're right, though. It doesn't matter if I think I can do it. It's like, well, do other people think that it can be done? And so that I became a man on a mission. Again, with a lot of COVID time on my hands, I sent a lot of messages out is what happened. I went and did my research. I went and looked up producers on IMDb. So anybody who's out there who has no connection to Hollywood, the internet is a beautiful thing because it has all the information. Anything you want to know, you pretty much go and find it. And so I went and figured out how to make a pitch deck. I just did reading, went on Reddit. It was like, how do people pitch movies? I was like, well, they use a pitch deck. I was like, okay, what's a pitch deck? And went and find Stranger Things pitch deck. It's very easy to find. Go and look it up and look what they made. And so I did that, and I just made my own. I copied theirs and I made my own. And then I went onto LinkedIn and Instagram and all the places and just sent people messages. I slid hard into everybody's DMs, really hard, and most they ignored me. I mean, like LinkedIn was probably my best bet because I think that no one sees you coming there for whatever reason. But like, I never got any responses on Instagram or Facebook. You try to message, Chris Hemsworth, and you're probably not even talking to him. But I looked up on IMDb a lot of shows that I felt were kind of in line with what I was trying to do, both Christian and secular. I'm just trying to find people who thought that this was a cool idea. And then I just went to work, man. Once I had a name, I'd go and I'd try to find an email. I'd try to find them on LinkedIn, message them, whatever I could do. And I sent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of messages out to people, and mostly got ignored. And when I didn't get ignored, mostly I got, no, stop. You can't do that. You need an agent. You know what I mean? Like, go get an agent, dude. If you want to be a part of this club, you got to enter in the way everybody else does. And you got to go and pay your dues and get an agent and move to Hollywood. So that was mostly the feedback I got. They were like, I literally can't look at this. Legally, I can't look at your pitch deck. Sorry. Try again with William Morris. You know what I mean? And so I just didn't let that deter me. The way I looked at it was, well, every time I get a no, there's no limit of people. IMDb is endless. So I just keep on going and looking for new people, somebody I hadn't bugged yet. And I eventually, man, like, every no for me was like, okay, probability for the next person to be a yes just went up, because I just got another no. So I can't get a no forever. Mathematically, I got to get a yes at some point. So I'll just keep on cooking. And so I eventually did, man. Someone responded, producer on a show. I sent him a message on LinkedIn, and this guy responded, and he was like, you know what? I'm feeling gracious today. I'll take a look at your thing, and he was just kind of like, I'm not looking at this as an official of the studio I work for or anything, just so you know. I was like, no, it's fine, man. I'm just looking for notes, which I was. I was just looking for notes at that point. I wanted to see if my pitch deck was even good. And so he was like, all right, I'll take a look at it. I'll give you notes. I was like, cool, thank you. And dude, he called me back in like 10 minutes. He messaged me back. He messaged me back and gave me his phone. He was like, hey, here's my phone number. Give me a call. I was like, oh,
that's exciting.
I got a big one, And so I gave him a call, man. And he was just so cool and so nice. And he was just like, hey, he was like, so what other shows have you worked on? And I was like, I haven't worked on any shows. And he was like, what do you mean? I was like, I work at a bank, man. I was like, I work at JP Morgan Chase. He was like, you're kidding me. I was like, no. And then he was like, well, this is a really good pitch deck. He's like, it's really good. He was like, you're I think you're onto something. This is a cool idea. It feels like something that hasn't been done. He's like, you're dealing with a mythology that feels really fresh, even though it's like the oldest mythology in the world, right? Like Sumerian, like Anunnaki. I mean, this is old, but it feels fresh because we're so like Greco-Roman Egyptian centric in our media. Like most Hollywood media, the mythologies that are being dealt with are like Greek, Roman, Egyptian, Greek, Roman, Egyptian, over and over and over and over again. We keep on redoing the same Norse, and then we like splash in some Norse mythology, and then it's like back to Greek, Rome. And so I think, he was like, and we just kept on hearing this over and over again about the fact that we were doing Mesopotamian and like Paleo Hebrew mythology. They're just like, it feels so fresh, it feels so different, but it feels like familiar too. Like it's like and it's like, yeah, because it's biblical. You know what I mean? It's like it feels familiar and fresh at the same time, which is like what they say is that's the special ingredient if you want to do something. Try to make it feel fresh and also nostalgic. And so man, he put me in contact with some people. He made connections, you know what I mean? Like gave me advice. Just didn't he was just very kind, right? And gracious, and didn't just brush me off. He gave me the time of day. And, and eventually he put me in contact with a guy named David Cunningham, who was a writer, a guy that had written on a show that this producer had worked on. And so he was like, he didn't even make the connection. He just was like, you should go. There's a guy that I work with. He's a writer. He's really good. Go do what you did to me and go hit him up on LinkedIn. He like didn't even make the connections. He was like, go do the work. I was like, cool, I'm fine with that. So I went and messaged this guy on LinkedIn. And he was like, I was like, hey, I heard you're a good writer. Then he was like, who told you that? He was like real suspicious, you know? And so I was like, no, your former boss, told me that, I have this idea. And so he was like, yeah, let me look at your idea. And he just loved it. Like he thought it was a really cool idea. And then he put me in contact with a producer, who had been at Disney for a long time, like had worked at Disney for 15 years. And he loved it. He read our script. So me and this other guy, we worked on a script together. I had a script, but I'm not really a writer. And so David rewrote my script, like put it in line with like, what's the standard kind of, what should a 3-act structure of a pilot be? He shaped it up. We sent it to this other guy, Al Moore, Disney legend. And he loved it. And when I was like, how do I be a part of this? And so then together, us three, we formed Colossal Studio. And David had worked on a show called The Wingfeather Saga. And The Wingfeather Saga was an Angel distributed show. And so he was like, there's this new streaming company called Angel Studios, and they take pitches. He was like, we should pitch your show to Angel. He's like, you submit it as a torch. And so we did that. We raised a little bit of money to make the animatic for the pilot. Just locally, man. I just knocked on doors and it was like, hey, can you give me money? And had some people that did, I raised like 30 grand locally, just here in my city. And I made the pilot, animatics, because Angel was like, you don't need to fully animate it, just submit, what they call a torch. And we did, and it passed. And then, the next year we were announced as one of the shows that were going to come out on Angel Studios. And so they then helped us do a crowdfund. So Angel is our distributor, but they don't make it. We're really independent. Like Angel, the way Angel works is like they work with independent filmmakers, and they help fundraise, and then they help distribute, but they really don't they don't mix in all that much in terms of they don't fund you either. They just help you fund, and so they helped us do a crowdfund, and we raised $500,000 from fans. And then we got another like 1.5 million from private investors after that we just hunted down, and just hustled. But momentum helps, right? So once you start getting momentum, and it's like, if you can go and you tell somebody, hey, I have this idea and I raised $500,000 from the crowd, and now you get the attention of people who have more money, right? And we raised enough to basically do pre-production for the first 6 episodes. And we were able to go ahead and fully make the pilot. And so that's kind of what got us here.
David Cunningham, isn't he the showrunner for your production?
Yeah. So once we got rolling, man, I was like, David, you should be, it was like, what do you want to do? Like, what do you want to be in this? And he's like, man, I'd love to be showrunner. I was like, well, you should be showrunner. You know what I mean? Like, because no one could tell us that wasn't, like, we've had people since that were like, oh, you need someone that's been a showrunner to be your showrunner. But I didn't know that. And so I was like, yeah, David, be the showrunner, man. And then he did awesome. We brought an actual episode to fruition, which nobody thought we could do. Like 3-4 guys, not from Hollywood, making a pilot. And then people are like, whoa, like they did it. And it's like good, not to toot my own horn, but like, I think people were shocked at the quality, you know what I mean? Like it looked good. And that David, like he just give people a shot, you never know. Like I liked David and I liked his writing. So when he was like, I'd like to be showrunner, I was like, yeah, man, be showrunner.
Gotcha. I think there's another Cunningham. I think the new show, David, not exactly my cup of tea, but my mom likes it well enough. But it also is by Angel Studios. I think it's made by a Phil Cunningham. I wonder if there's a relation there.
I don't think so, but I haven't seen that yet. You thought it was all right?
It's okay. It's okay. It's just not my, it's just not my thing. I'm more into anime, not so much into the Game of Thrones likes, but that's just me.
I'm with you. What's funny is I had an idea. Like when I came up with the concept for Gabriel, I came up with a concept for a David anime style show. It was like kind of like Gabriel, but a little more historical. And it focused solely on David the Outlaw King. That was what I called it, David the Outlaw King. And it focused on him and his mighty men. Like in the story of David, he's exiled by Saul, and then he goes out into the desert and he gets all these like marauders that like join him and like become his like army, like 300 like soldiers, like warriors. And then they go around for like the next decade and they like systematically retake all of the cities in Judea, and then fight, and then in the Israel area from like the foreign kings that have come and like taken over all these different Judea cities. David and his mighty men go through and like basically like save everybody while Saul can't. And that's why David ends up rising to become the king. First, he becomes the king of Judea, and then they go and sack Jerusalem, and he becomes. This is all in the book of Samuel. It's fascinating, but it was really like that part of the story seemed so interesting. But anyway, I digress.
No, it's fine. I think you guys for this show, you released a prequel comic over there with the Rippaverse, if I have that correct.
Dude.
Did you help put that together, since you have a little bit of a background in comics?
Yeah. So man, I'm just a hustler. So like when it comes to it, like at the end of the day, I'm just a dude that has the internet, and then I use it. And so it's a really interesting story. So this is the book, actually. I have it with me. There it is. Look at that. Pretty cool.
Nice.
So this is the one that actually Rippo has republished issue 0, but we actually put this book out through Angel on their store. And then we took it to conventions and stuff, because we've been doing the convention circuits. But basically, we wanted to try to put something together because we knew we really wanted to put out a monthly issue. We knew we were going to be able to put the episode out, and then there would be a break before we got the rest of the season. Hazbin Hotel, this happened to Hazbin Hotel. They put out their pilot, and then it was like 3 years before the rest of the season. Now, we're not going to be that long. We're open to have the rest of the season. We're open to start putting out episodes before the end of the year again. But what we need to have something in between. So what if we were able to do an ongoing monthly, comic or manga? And so I did pull on my old connection from Ape Entertainment, and the editor of the comic that I did called Scarlet Veronica, he went on to become the editor-in-chief at IDW. And so I reached out to him and I said, hey man, well, are you still at IDW? And he had left. He was actually just he was like a consultant. And so I said, hey, would you come on and help us? I said, we want to make a comic. I told him about Gabriel. I said, we got the show. It's coming out. It's going to be on Angel Studios. So we've got a platform. I was like, but would you be willing to help us kind of navigate trying to get a deal with like a publisher? We don't have time to make the book ourselves because we're going to be making the show, but we really feel like it would be helpful to have an ongoing monthly, just like anime does, right? Just like a real anime. We're inspired by that model. We're not just inspired by the content, we're inspired by the entire model. I think it's awesome. Put out the comic, let people fall in love with the comic, and then they can go watch the show. And so he basically was like, yeah, I hope you guys put it together. He's like, but he was basically like, you'll never find a publisher that once we told them what we were like, yeah, we don't really we want the publisher to do the work, like creative. And then like, we want to do a split on the back end, like after they sell the books. And he was like, you'll never find that. That's not a deal that you'll find in the comic book industry. He's like, that's just not. And he was like, and even if you did find a publisher who would do that, like for an IP that's unknown, right, is what he meant. Like for an IP that is unknown, he's like, no publisher's gonna like go ahead and just sign up, like sign up for a monthly comic with you. And he's like, and even if you did, he's like, there would be no split. They'd just take all the profit if there wasn't any. And so I was like, okay, fair enough. I'm like, but let's do it anyway. Let's give it a try. So he was like, if you're going to pay me. So we made that preview issue. And then I reached out to Eric July. Honestly, it was like not that long ago, just back in December.
Pretty recent.
Yeah. Eric July and I connected, and he had heard about Gabriel. And honestly, I wasn't even thinking about them publishing us. It wasn't what was in my mind. I just wanted to talk to him. I was like, hey man, you you've been through it. You know what I mean? Different people have different opinions about Eric July and Rippaverse, and I was like, I'd just love to pick your brain and hear your story. And so he's like, yeah, let's get on a call. So we got on a call. Again, I slid right into those DMs on LinkedIn. That's how I got in touch with him. And so we got on a Zoom call. And I mean, 10 minutes into that Zoom call, he just was like, hold on. He was like, honestly, he's like, this is a cool property. He's like, I just got to ask, like, what are you doing for comic? Are you putting a comic out? What are you doing? And we were like, well, it's funny. You should say that. Like, we have this book, we have this like test that we did with Angel. And the point was to try to find a publisher that would publish like an ongoing monthly series, but we just, we're not having any luck. And that's when he was just like, I think Rippaverse would be very interested in that. And so we walked that out, and they ended up offering us a really awesome deal. I mean, honestly, it was pretty much what we wanted. Like, it was like what we had, what the deal that the guy that we had talked to that was like, you'll never find that. It was like, that's pretty much exactly what Rippa offered us. And so yeah, we're real excited. I think we're looking to launch the actual beginning of the series, like issue 1, maybe in May, and then it'll be a monthly ongoing series.
Okay. Well, I hope that works out for you guys. When you were putting out together the comic, thinking about the show as being a separate being, did you think about like how you're going to handle the lore or the content of the comic and how that reflects the show? Because I know in obviously like a huge property like Star Wars, that sometimes has caused some problems because they're like, well, you have to consume all of it. You have to watch both the show and you have to also read the comic to know everything that's happening. And I know this is also a big complaint of the Marvel stuff now also. It's like, well, but people don't want to do that. They're lazy. So we just want to watch one of them. We just want to watch the show. That's all we want.
Watch the show and then you read it. No, I think that what we want to do is really just follow that Japanese model, which is we want to get ahead of the show, which we have this opportunity to get ahead of the show, so that if you're picking up the manga, there's an incentive because you'll actually get to see the story play out in comic book form before you see it on the show. And so, yeah, we're going to be following the narrative of the actual show in comic book format, but with supplemental material. So it's almost like there will be an incentive to read it because you'll get a little extra backstory. There's just a little more space to explore. Kind of like Dragon Ball. Like if you read Dragon Ball, it's like there are small sagas that take place in between the big sagas that don't ever make it into the actual anime. Little things, expanded concepts. And so that's what we're doing. Like we just finished writing the first issue. It'll be like a 45-page issue. And it definitely, it's like it follows the events. It follows Gabriel's story. That is the events of the first episode, but it's expanded. It's got some more backstory. It's got a little more lore. So you just learn a little more about the world. And, pilots are interesting because you got to put so much in there. We had to introduce all of our main characters, all the different worlds that are involved, the different, who are the players. And so with the manga, we're able to the first issue is just Gabriel's story and just focusing on what happens there in Paradem, which is where Gabriel's at, the floating island. And then it's going to tell a little bit about like, well, why is he there? What happened? What's going on? Why is this place on lockdown? Why would anything be after the seed? We kind of tell some of that backstory.
Okay. That makes sense. It is different. That's not really done very much where Western entertainment tries to do the manga thing where they're kind of, because they kind of like it more to be a supplement than to be something that's like retelling the same material. Whereas in like, you're right, in Japan, they have no problem if you're basically redoing the material. But also yours is a little different because like they produce the manga first, and then if it does well enough later on, you might get an anime. You're kind of almost the reverse.
We're kind of in the reverse. We just have this gap that's going to allow us to get, we definitely use the pilot, the fact that we have a show to get the manga done, but then the manga is going to be able, because it'll be able to be produced so much faster, it'll jump ahead. And I think that I like the idea that it's going to for super fans, like it's gonna be a place where people can like really dive into they'll know more. They'll get like, you know, the Silmarillion of our story will be contained inside of the manga.
Okay. How did you guys manage to book the voice cast? It's a pretty solid voice cast. Very, very solid. Almost surprisingly quality voice cast. You have some really big talents. I mentioned it earlier. Johnny Bosch, love Johnny Bosch. Can do almost no wrong in my eyes. You have also people from like the Star Wars, Clone Wars show. I mean, you got some big talents there. How did you guys go about getting them? And I mean, how did you get them to sign on? And how's all that work?
Yeah. Well, I'll say Johnny is so cool and super nice, and like just as like, I mean, he's just been such a champion on this thing. Like you would never guess that he has been, you know, as prolific of a star and a voice actor as he's been, because he's so down to earth and he's so just like cool. So I just want to say that right off the top, like, dude, he's real. That guy's a real one. And so Johnny was the only one that I knew from before. And what happened was when I was just doing like, when I was working at Chase, I had this like freelance job that I did because I wanted to try to keep, this was years and years ago. I got involved with a comic that was like intended to raise awareness for human trafficking. And this guy was like doing this thing that was it was like a nonprofit. And I came on to do some art for it. And one of the ideas that I had, because I was at Chase and I was like building innovative, like interactive training, I was like, what we should do is we should make like that like turns this into like a motion story and have like someone do the voice like for the characters. So it's kind of like a hybrid. It's like half animated, half comic. So I built a test, like a test of that, and showed it to the guy, and he was like, no, I love this. And he like put a little more money into it. And then I went to a Nashville, I went to a comic book convention in Nashville. I think it was in Nashville. And I went and saw Johnny, like he was signing books. I like stood in line and like had my like little thing. And I just was like, hey man, I'm involved in this project. I think it'd be really cool for you to do a voice for it. And like left him the info. And he was just kind of like, yeah, man, that sounds cool. And but then he actually emailed me. He actually reached out, and like we and it never went anywhere. That was the funny thing. Like the project died, but I still had his email because he had emailed me and he had recorded some lines for that. So when years later, when I had the idea for Gabriel, I shot an email out and I was like, hey Johnny, I know you probably remember me, but I was the dude that did that thing. I got another thing. Would you maybe be interested in doing that thing with me? And he was like, yeah, man, I like this thing even more. And then he recorded some Gabriel lines for us for the trailer, for like the original like pitch concept. He recorded the Gabriel lines, and then the rest was history with him. And then he introduced me to Christina. He brought Christina V on because they knew each other, and he told her about the project and she joined. And then James, it's another funny story. So, you know who Jars of Clay is?
Jars of Clay.
Yeah, so Jars of Clay was like this Christian band in the 90s. And it
Jars of Clay, not Jars of Clay. Jars of Clay. Gotcha.
This monster hit. It was like a big crossover hit called Flood back in like 95 or 96. Anyway, I just so happened to be like, got introduced to him. He was in Columbus and we were getting coffee. And he was like, he was asking me about the show because like we were introduced because of the show. And he was like, I've got this neighbor who does cartoon voices. And I was like, man, if I had a dime for every time someone told me about their brother or their cousin or their neighbor who does cartoon voices and trying to get them a slot on the show, I'm like, oh man. But it turned out to be James Arnold Taylor. And so like And we met, and I was like, "Oh my God, dude, you're the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi." He was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Hello there." I'm like, "Dude, I just thought you were a random schmuck." You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
that was pretty
That's
funny.
funny. That's great. Yeah, because you're like, it's just like someone's brother or cousin. They're just not very good.
Yeah,
That turns out
that's
to be
what
like
I
this
was
mega
fully
star.
expecting. But I was like, "Yeah, Dan Dean, I don't want to, oh, sure, I'll meet your neighbor." Yeah, and then James introduced us to Matt because he'd worked a lot with Matt. So, and Matt loved the project, and so they just all loved the concept, and they all came on because of that. I mean, they all came on like without any real. I mean, these guys are awesome, dude. They came on to none of them. So there's something called most favored nations where everybody agrees to the lowest like scale pay. They all agreed to do that for the show because they just believed in it.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah, man.
That gives me. I mean, not to put you or your production down, but seeing those names on there gives me a bit more confidence in your production that what you're
Sure.
actually is going to come out is going to be good versus like,
No, I agree.
we'll say it's not. Well, it's like how people at church, like, when it's bad, but you're nice anyways. Oh, that was nice.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, and I know, like, honestly, them having worked on so much, it gave a lot of like, it was like we would work with them on the scripts, and so if they thought the lines were good, it was like, okay, and then these lines are probably good. But if they were like, oh, can we mess with these lines a little bit? It was like, okay, no, for sure, please go ahead, you guys. We're catching the hint. The lines aren't great. Let's zhuzh them up. Let's make them a little better. And so it was really cool because a lot of those voice actors, man, like they do a lot of characters that already had somebody embody the character. So like Johnny is doing a lot of characters that someone else has already voiced it in a different language, or someone's already played that role, right? And same, Christina V, like with Miraculous, there was a French actress that played the character first. With James, it was like there was already two guys who already played Obi-Wan Kenobi. And so, but with this, these were brand new characters. And so I think there was some excitement around being able to like bring something that is like theirs, right? Like, it's like no one else has done this character yet. I get to make it as I go. I get to bring what I bring to it. And honestly, like, I'm just very collaborative. So like, as a character designer, the moment I heard James do the voice of Dionel, so he does the voice of the guy with the Celestial with the beard that's like Gabriel's mentor, and then he also does the bad guy, Malacros. And so the moment I heard him do the voice of Dionel, I immediately that night went back and redesigned the character. Like immediately, as soon as I heard him do the voice, I was like, oh yeah, I got a new idea, a new mental image of who that character is supposed to be. And so James really informed how the character design ended up being. So there's this really cool sort of collaborative back and forth in the creation process.
Yeah, I'm sure that's helpful. I feel like with some of the productions that have attempted to kind of be in this conservative or cultural space, like a lot of the stuff, the Daily Wire, I think a lot of it falls very, very flat. And I think some of that back and forth is really necessary to polish things up. And that could be a key of what they're missing. So that's good to hear.
Yeah.
What are some of the, trying to put together an animated show, what were some of the production headaches or trials that came along with it that you were not anticipating, or some of the difficulties because you guys were independent, you were trying to create a high production value show in a space where usually that's not there? Like, did you have struggle like finding people to help work with your in-between animation or anything like that?
Dude, that's a great question, man. Kudos. Nobody's asked that question yet. So that's very cool. Yeah, I got a good story for this. So we were working with this animation studio. So the way a lot of American animation works, actually, no matter what, you may know this, but even if it's like a preschool Disney show, a lot of times the pre-production is done in the States, and then it's actually sent over to an overseas studio, India or Korea or Philippines, where it's then animated over there in what they call layout to composite, right? So that's where it gets kind of final look. But like basically story to script to storyboards is all done here with a production team on this side, and then you put a package together and then you send it over, and they do the ink and paint and everything. And so we had our package together. We'd gotten the first episode package, so we had all the voice records, we had all the character designs together, we had the animatic, and through miscommunication, we discovered very last minute that we had around 650 shots, and the limit that the studio that was going to be doing the animation for us, they had a limit of how many shots for one episode they would do, and it was 350.
Ooh, so you're almost twice over that.
650 shots.
Ooh.
You know how a show works, right? Any scene is comprised of a bunch of shots, and a shot is any time the camera changes, right? Anytime you cut, that's a shot. And so we had 2 weeks to go look at this episode and go, we have to remove. Now they ended up being cool, and they were like, look, if you can get it down to 400, that'd be awesome. So, but still, like 150 shots that we had to figure out how to take out while keeping the story coherent. You know what I mean? While keeping like the flow of story coherent. So that was quite the task. And I mean, and honestly, it was like, at first it was like, we can't do this. This is impossible. We're dead. We're like, literally, I think someone was like, we're dead. We're done. And I was like, hold on. Like, let's just see what can be done. This may not be as difficult as we think. And so that night I went home myself and I took our animatic and I was like, what could I, let me just see how far I can get. I mean, I stayed up pretty late. I stayed up till like 2 a.m. and I was cutting. I probably spent 4 or 5 hours, and I cut out like 60 shots. And so I was like, look guys, in one evening, I cut out 60 shots. We've got 2 weeks. We can do this. And so we went all hands on deck. Everybody, even if you weren't an editor, you got in there and you started trying to help us find where we could cut shots and extend shots and make it so it stayed coherent. And we did it, man. We got through it, and we were able to, I think, is there a version of the episode where those shots would have made it a little bit better? Probably. But I think mostly we covered it up and were able to make it so it's not super noticeable that there were literally 150 extra shots in that episode.
That's interesting. What's the standard length that you're going for your show? Like how many minutes?
22 minutes is which ends up being about a half-hour block on broadcast.
Yeah. So that's about a classic 30-minute anime show, basically.
That's what we were aiming for. We really wanted to try to stay inside of those lines, even though a lot of modern shows are kind of like Invincible's all over the place on its time. We just wanted to stay as traditional as possible to the format.
Yeah, no, a lot of shows, especially the bigger ones, they're just playing loose and fast with those.
They are, man. I don't know how they're gonna if we ever come back to any kind of I mean, that's the weird thing, is a lot of the world still has a lot of broadcasts. America has moved away from it in some ways. I mean, not totally. Broadcast still a big thing, but there are countries that is still the primary way that people watch TV is broadcast.
Yeah.
I don't know how Invincible translates to broadcast. That'd be wild to see.
Invincible, though, Amazon's thing is that they're bringing in I mean, a lot of their voice actors are actually talented, but they're celebrities, so it's like that oomph. But I'm sure that comes at a much higher cost, I'd have to imagine.
Yeah. We're in the middle of trying to lock down a relatively big voice actor. Well, actor.
Actor.
And I wish I could say it.
And no, we gotta keep close to it, especially if it falls apart. And then
that's the thing. It's like we have been at the last 5% of closing the deal for a month. It's like, is this gonna happen or what? What's actually weird? We did an interview with somebody with this actor already, and then we had to go back and be like, yeah, we can't, like, we haven't closed the deal yet, so you can't put the interview out.
Yeah, don't wanna ruin it for you guys.
Yeah.
All right, so we're starting to wrap things up here. I appreciate you having the time to meet with me.
Of course, man.
I'm getting a little jazzed, a little excited for your cartoon. I hoping it's good. I like everything I'm hearing, so I'm excited for you guys. I haven't finished the pilot. I watched about half of it before getting ready for this interview. It seems pretty solid from what I saw.
Yeah, I think it really, I'd say the first 11 minutes is really dedicated to introducing the three primary characters, and then you kind of get the back half is sort of like more plot driven toward what's going on with the seed, and it's a lot of action. Like all the action kind of tends to be on the back end of the episode.
So I'll do this for our last question. Where are you hoping that the series will go, and what do you think you're hoping it will do for this space, either in animation or maybe the more Christian space? What are you hoping the kind of impact that the show is going to have?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what it does in the Christian space, I'm not too concerned about. I think that what it does for indie animation, I think is something very interesting, because I think that we live in a world where it's possible, to actually, I mean, I think we're showing it. It's like you can not be from Hollywood, and you can come up with an idea, and there's a path to create your show and to get it made, and to get an actual pilot out there, and then to get funding to get the show done. And so I think that, we have a distributor. Even our distributor's relatively indie. I mean, Angel Studios is not a monster, distributor by any means. And so, and we did this extremely indie, and so I think that what I love about it is that it shows that there's room for indie animation, and it can be done well. Like, it can be done good, and you can draw voice actors that are, in all the mainstream stuff, because they're cool and they want to do cool projects. And so, I'd say that, man, if you're listening to this right now and you're like, I had a great idea, I wish I could do it. Make a pitch deck. Go look up what pitch decks look like and make your own pitch deck, and then go to a convention and talk to your favorite voice actor. Maybe they'll like it, and maybe they'll want to work with you on it. You never know. You never know until you try.
All right, that's a good message. Get out there. Put yourself out there.
Get your art out there, man. The world's better because you're here, and we want to know. We want to see your art. So,
yeah, we need that. Less complaining about everything, more creating. I agree with that. Alrighty, guys. Well, we're gonna wrap this up. Before we go, where can people find your stuff if they want to go watch Gabriel and the Guardians? Where can they find your productions?
You can go to GabrielTheGuardians.com. That's an easy one. And if you don't want to do that, you can just grab the Angel app, and we're there. We're on the Angel app, and you can watch the first episode for free. All you got to do is sign up, and it's there for free. You don't even have to become a guild member. But if you do become a guild member, which is, I think, like $12 a month, we've got all kinds of behind the scenes stuff, and I think we got a sneak peek for episode 2 and all that stuff in there. And we have a really cool panel discussion, the roundtable discussion that we did with Johnny and some of the other people that made the show. So, GabrielTheGuardians.com. That should get you where you need to go.
Yeah, and you could go also pre-order the comic over at Rippaverse,
yes,
whatever they call themselves.
Go get the issue 0 at Rippaverse, and help us there. That helps out the show. That helps us, get more episodes and get more issues out. So
awesome. All right. Well, that will do it for us today. Thank you so much, Jason, for taking the time to talk with me here today. I'm excited for your show. Congrats on success with the project, and I hope it continues to do well. And to all my audience, thank you so much. You're the reason I do this. The show wouldn't be possible without the help of my editor, Chris Holowicki, who makes me look way more competent than I actually am. And, of course, all of you guys. So, until next time, keep nerding out. Hey there, gang! If you are a fan of CultureScape, and I know you are, and want to get involved in supporting the show, well, now you can! By joining the CultureScape Patreon, you'll help support me and my editor Chris as we create the show and produce more quality journalism. For just $5 or $10 a month, you not only help us, but get access to our exclusive members-only Discord. You'll also get to vote on and suggest new guests for the interview. So if you are a fellow weeb and love CultureScape, then come join us today on Patreon.